All right, so in this video, we are going to talk a little bit about how to push your transitions to that next level. So specifically, we're going to be focusing on those transitions in the body paragraphs around like our main points, our yellows, and then our evidence sentences, our first prove-its. There's a lot of different ways to embed transitions, so we're going to talk about a couple of different ways to do it in a way that will make sure that your organization still stays strong, your ideas flow clearly, but at the same time you're using sophisticated word choice and all that sort of stuff. So really the difference between a 3 and a 4 transition is that a 3 transition is just there, like we can see that we've got a transition in this main point to begin, comma, and then we get into our main point. A 4 transition is embedded within the sentence. So what that means is it's not so obvious. It's not, like right there staring you in the face. It might be hidden somewhere. It might be incorporated into another idea. So in order to do that in the main point, let's talk about kind of the purpose of what a transition does, particularly in an argument sentence. So like this is our first body paragraph. This is the counter argument language. You'll notice we have a transition. Purpose of that transition is just to announce to the reader, hey, I'm starting a new idea here, right? So that's why it says to begin. Then we have some argument language to say, hey, this is what the other side thinks, and then we have what the other side thinks. So the key is to embed this transition, we just take the piece that says this is a new idea, and we just put it somewhere else. So for example, I could delete that transition. I could make this the beginning of the sentence. And I could say, one may think, comma, first of all, comma, that binge watching is beneficial because it's a wonderful, easy way for people to connect with one another, right? So that's one way to do it. That's like, I would say of the ways to embed a transition, that's the most straightforward way to do it. It's also probably the least like fancy and sophisticated way to do it. So we'll talk about another way to do it here in a second. But notice that I still have that piece in there that indicates, hey, this is a new idea. It's just that it's not kind of like jarring in at the beginning of the sentence. So let's go back to how we had it before and look at another way to do this. Oop, go back here. Again, I just need something in there to say, hey, this is a new idea. So if I do the same thing I did before, get that to begin out of there, replace it with, just the one may think. I could sneak my transition within the argument language too, right? So I could say one may initially think binge watching is beneficial because it's a wonderful, easy way, right? So I still have the idea in there, but then what this word is doing is it's kind of like sneaky showing in the middle of the argument language. It's still showing the reader like, hey, this is a first of all type transition, right? And then when I get down here, I wouldn't use the word like initially, but I could say like some would also be right to believe binge watching is a valuable activity. I could sneak it into the argument language down there. Down here, I could say many would also argue in summation in support of binge watching because it creates a more satisfying experience. So really it's up to you to figure out how you want to incorporate those things, those pieces in there. But that's the basics for a main point. Now, let's take this back to how it was before, and let's focus on the elaboration piece, or the evidence piece. So we know that an evidence sentence, traditionally, the first way we learned how to do it, the way we traditionally do it, is to start with an in the text transition, like an article states, and then I introduce my quote, right? But again, think purpose. What is that quote in there to do? That quote is in there to show that like there's another person out there, in this case it's somebody named Smith. There's another person out there that agrees with your idea, and so you're using their credibility. It's almost like ethos, right? You're using their ethos to say to your reader, hey, I'm right? Binge watching is good because it lets people connect with each other, or at least in this case, some people think that. So I can still use a transition like this, or a way to incorporate it is to make the quote kind of part of my sentence. So instead of an article states, I could do something like, I've said here in my main point, binge watching, one may think binge watching is beneficial because it's a wonderful, easy way for people to connect with one another. I could say something like, I don't know what the first name of the person might be, but let's pretend it's John. John Smith, in his article about binge watching, says, instead of feeling lonely or isolated, right? Again, it's still, I don't know that that's quite embedded entirely, but it's a little bit more of a sophisticated transition. So that's option one. I could also just continue my thought from the end of this sentence and make that quote part of the thought that I continue, right? So I could say, well, this means that instead of feeling lonely or isolated, this shared space makes it easier to blah, 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 right? So all I've done here is I've made this quote, I've sort of like stolen those words and made them a part of my thinking, right? And because I've incorporated into a sentence that's mine, I don't need that comma there, okay? That's level 2. Level 3 is where I look at the quote that I have and I think, well, what really matters in that quote? What do I really need my reader to understand about what this author is saying? So specifically, if we look at this quote, what the author is saying is, well, binge watching is good because you can share an experience or you can share a space with other people and you can share personal perspectives, and that is better than being lonely, right? So what I could do is, and I'm just going to move this down here so I can keep it there while I rewrite my evidence sentence. I could say, it's a wonderful, easy way for people to connect with one another. In fact, we'll make this red. In fact, many people may argue that, and then I can throw in some of the quote, right? Instead of feeling lonely or isolated, that's the part that I want from the beginning of the quote. When someone binge watches a television show, they have the opportunity to create a shared space, right? Which is also from the quote. And again, I'd still have the citation at the end because I am still using their words. But what I've done is I've taken parts of the quote, like the phrase shared space, and I put it in my sentence. I took this part of the quote, instead of feeling lonely or isolated, I put it in my sentence, right? And I've allowed myself as the writer, because I'm really the valuable opinion in the essay, right? If I'm the one writing the essay, there should be more of me than there is of John Smith or whoever it is. So I've allowed my voice to come through, and I've only picked and chosen the parts of the quotes that really matters to me, which also allows me to like include more of my own language. This is a place, these are places where I could add in like ly words or ing words or enhance some, boring words, that kind of stuff. So by doing that and by incorporating the quote into my sentence, I've also eliminated that boring, bland transition that used to be there, and I've just continued my thought from the main point into the evidence, and I've hidden the transition within that quote or that sentence that includes the quote. So again, that's level 3. You can go back and look at level 1 and level 2 in terms of those evidence sentences. And then, we talked about the main points as well. So a lot of different ways to incorporate and embed those transitions. I would say a challenge for yourself might be to do that a couple of times in each body paragraph, if not every time. So give it a shot. Do what you can.